Every relationship is a phase. The desire to evolve is the core. Preamble. I believe that the real changes of 2025 are not going to come from the outside. Although the outside world seems very surreal and at times crazy, and many times like it doesn't make sense. What I'm starting to understand is this. The beginning of the year was Mars Pluto opposition, Venus and Mercury retrograde conjoined, the first batch of eclipses in Pisces and Aries, with Saturn and Neptune in the mix and squaring Jupiter. The beginning of the year brought not only confusion, but also a wave of external deception, distorted narratives, mixed signals, misplaced trust, all of which served as a mirror to show us where we can get grounded for what is there to come. And every single thing I've been talking about this year, what I'm starting to realize now as an insight is that the real transformation is what we're all going through at our own pace and at our own level of consciousness. We also reached the Bitcoin all-time high this weekend, and it unearthed some feelings I hadn't yet put into words. It helped me process at the core of what I consider valuable at this moment in my life. It's not money, nor a prize, nor a number. It is the relationship I have with my need to feel safe in a self-preservation kind of way. That tension between trusting and not abandoning, between discrimination and control. Once it clicked, I felt the sweet song that made me dance. Financial charts are reading the sentiment of the people. You got to find yourself in which part of the wave you are. We'll still have this summer ahead, which is going to be even more intense, but the intensity is going to be felt inside. Questions such as who am I as an individual? How am I serving humanity? And is this something I want to tune into as service, or do I just want to take from society? It's a real question. And I honestly believe, without offending anybody, that the people who want to take from society are not engaged in introspection. They don't even have the ability to reflect. So I'm speaking more to those of us who are actively questioning, aligning, and tuning our own frequency. When 2026 comes to be, we're going to be so transformed. If we allow that transformation to occur, that the outcome of what we call reality will be completely different. Not because it changes, but because you change. This is the power of human action. This is the power of consciousness. This is the power of being aware. Ta-da! Quote, the core desire within the soul is to evolve. This desire is what causes the soul to project itself into a manifested world in order to learn the necessary lessons that will bring it closer to the source. These lessons are revealed through our relationships, how we meet others, how we attract, what we repel, and what remains unresolved within ourselves. Jeffrey Wolf Green, Pluto, The Soul's Evolution Through Relationships, Volume 2. The axis of perception. Every relationship is different. It all depends on the perspective where you're located and where the other situation, person, or thing is standing. Thus, relationships are individual perspectives, and they become non individual when one side starts becoming aware of what is happening via diverse points of view. I'm framing relationship not as a fixed thing between two people, situations, or things, but as a shifting dynamic based on where you are holding a position, what you are perceiving, and when awareness enters. This perception or view is also based on your conditioning. Where did you grow up? What languages you speak? How was your relationship with your parents, to your culture, to what you worship, to your needs? So everything, even within yourself, everything is relational. This article wants to dissolve the idea of relationship as something that is predefined. It becomes a field of consciousness shaped by angle, experience, projection, and recognition. Quote, astrological aspects are not merely angles. They are phases of a dynamic cycle. They represent specific types of relationships between planetary functions, each with its own type of instruction and value. These values evolve depending on where you are in the cycle, just as a full moon means something different than a new moon, even though both are conjunctions of sorts. Then richer astrological aspects. End of quote. I've always been aware that I need another person, a situation, or a thing to become really conscious of who I am and where I'm at. Conversations for me are very important. Something always happens in dialogue. Now, I do that by myself. I've been using this practice for 7 or 8 years since I started studying astrology to understand more clearly which phase of the relationship I'm in. Let's start from the basic. I was born a very curious person, but not just about how things work. The questions were always very deep. What am I doing here? What's the purpose of life? This is defined by my Pluto, my evolutionary desire, the soul's desire. Pluto is in the eighth house, its own house, in Virgo. The archetypes here speak to my desire to learn how to discern and analyze, to become more analytical about the purpose of my life. If I really have to reduce everything, it's my desire to evolve. I'm here just evolving. That's the core. Another aspect of Pluto in Virgo is that I'm always in a constant practice of purification. Because you see, when you become too analytical, you start seeing things that are not working. Therefore, you want to make them perfect. You want to realign them, restructure them, make them wholesome. That's a very Virgo sixth house Mercury type function. Trying to restore order or what makes sense. Interestingly enough, when I started studying astrology, I realized that a lot of important people in my life that I was attracting were either Virgo rising, Moon in Virgo, Sun in Virgo, something Virgo. I'm attracting in my eighth house this kind of intimacy so I can actually learn both aspects of the Virgo archetype because it's not just about analyzing and criticizing, it's about surrendering and becoming wholesome, about embracing discernment and trust. The polarity point of Virgo is in Pisces. Quote, oppositions symbolize the fulfillment of a cycle. They are the most conscious of all aspects, for they force a person to face the full implication of polarity. There is no escape in the opposition. One must either learn to integrate or become fragmented in tension. Yet, when integration occurs, oppositions give rise to the clearest light. Then, rooted astrological aspects. End of quote. So, let's speak about aspects. As I mentioned before, transiting Pluto is squaring my Jupiter. But what I'm really talking about is a transit that's actually activating the natural function of Jupiter in my third house, Taurus, which is in a balsamic relationship to my Sun and very close to my Mercury retrograde. So let's decode this. What does it mean to have a Jupiter in Taurus in a balsamic relationship to the Sun, the center of my life? While Mercury retrograde is in a Gazimi relationship to the Sun, Casimi means Mercury is exactly conjunct the Sun within less than 1 degree, a moment of potential clarity and seeding. When you think about the third house and Mercury, you think about ideas. But Mercury is retrograde, so it's very internalized function in the mind. Mercury and Gemini are the logical stream of our cognition, and Jupiter is the abstract, more intuitive part that integrates every single piece of knowledge. The way it synthesizes is through experience. That's why Jupiter is close to the seeking of truth, to the pilgrim who leaves home and, in the journey, finds himself or herself. Technically, a retrograde Kazemi is part of the inferior conjunction, which marks the beginning of a new Mercury cycle. But that cycle is born within, is not yet visible. It's a moment of internal conception, not external clarity. That's why Mercury here is looking inside and trying to make sense of reality in a way that can ground my perception of how I see and validate myself. Now, the Sun as a sandwich here is very interesting. It stands in the middle of two streams. One is logical and the other one is abstract. Together, they help me synthesize and ground what I perceive, ideas and ideologies, into something that I can integrate and communicate. What is a balsamic relationship? It's the end of a cycle. It's the moment when two bodies come together. And in that meeting, they merge and give birth to something new, an energy that is shared, but is the final stage of that conjunction. It has a very different tone than a new phase conjunction. Think about the new moon. Think about the minutes before the new moon. It's like a dark moon. You can barely see it. Everything is dissolving. You cannot see the definition. In this balsamic relationship, I am dissolving behavior and merging with a new light through the sun in order to respond differently to the perspective offered by Jupiter. Jupiter's role here is essential. Jupiter gives me meaning, but that meaning only comes after a full experience arc. In a balsamic relationship, I'm not in the middle of growth. I am preparing for a new philosophical worldview as I am dissolving fixed ideologies. Taurus is both stubborn and fixed. So that something new can take form when the cycle begins again. And transiting Pluto is an incredible opportunity to transform my views through embodied experience. Quote, each conjunction is not simply a beginning. Its quality depends entirely on the phase relationship of the faster planet to the slower one. A balsamic conjunction at the end of the cycle carries a weight of dissolution, closure, and vision for the future. It is the seed of letting go, not a birth, but a preparation for one. Then Rudyard, astrological aspects. End of quote. Ta-da! Now we can introduce the three stages of planetary cycles. Unlike, for instance, involutional, the spirit is incarnated into form. This is the first half, the hemicycle, the first part of the cycle. It generates, it encodes, it is seeding, it is formative, it is instinctual, it is a ground that is subjective. The whole arc is energy that is building, gathering, emerging, and moving into form. Evolutionary begins at the opposition, 180 degrees. Here, there is a conscious development. There is awareness. There is another thing that we're seeing from another perspective. So you become aware of you, of your individuality. This is a Libra function. How I can relate to the needs of the other person, situation, or thing. There is mirroring, there is individuation. You start breaking away from what you thought was you because you are confronted with other ideas, situations, people, and then you can break free from that perception while you mirror your projection and allow something new to emerge. That is the reason for relationships. There is recognition, there is objective growth, and there is synthesis through polarity. So here the energy is now conscious, it is aware. This is a reflective learning. This is the integrity phase. And this is why relationships, when they're aware, are really good. Because instead of falling into projections or trying to please others because of our own unmet needs, we start mirroring them without assuming that it is just about mimicking. Rather, we use the mirror as an opportunity to evolve. Think of a full moon awareness. Now you can see what emerges. The next cycle is devolutionary. It is a waning cycle. It's the breaking of form. It's from 180 degrees to 360, back home. So this energy is dissolving, it's releasing, and it's preparing for a rebirth. You can see some decay, some composting, some disintegration, some liberation, and some reabsorption into the new. This is the balsamic one. What has been created is no longer needed in its old form. This is the letting go part. So I already spoke about Mercury and Jupiter. That is a planetary pair. Let's speak now about the moon and Saturn. Why do I know these pairs very well? Because they are the rulers of my nodal axis. I was born with Saturn ruling my south node of the moon, and the moon being the ruler of my north node. So we can speak about boundaries, we speak about protection, we speak about security, about structure, about accountability, and embracing one's heart. Because both Mercury and Jupiter are in the third house, this dialogue happens in real time. It shows at all times in my conversations, in my writing, in the way I process reality moment to moment. By being in Taurus, it makes this deeply embodied because Taurus, Venus, and the second house are all about essential needs. I am sensing the truth through texture, resonance based contact. It is a very physical energy, but because I'm using the mind structure, I stay away from just theories. I need to actually embody and experience these ideas so they become a way of living, a way of life. As Mercury is gathering information, it translates through the senses. And remember, It is retrograde, so it is also internalizing this through the senses, but also it takes time to process. While Jupiter is trying to give it a place, a value, a larger field, a meaning, in Taurus, it does need to take some time to understand the shape of things. It needs to digest. They both seek coherence in the practice, not in the theory. It is a foundational mental activity. I speak from knowledge. When I'm curious, I ask questions because I need to ground them in an experience. I need to speak from a feeling where the meaning will land eventually. So when this pair is activated by transit, like right now with Pluto squaring Jupiter and soon squaring my Sun and my Mercury, it is being tested. Do I still hold this perspective? Is it really mine? Can it evolve? This is a resensing of the meaning from where I am right now. It's a slow process of changing my point of view. In the next part, as Saturn speaks to form, the moon speaks emotional need. And because they both rule my nodal axis, this tension becomes the development path in itself. This is the energy and the frequency that I came with. It gives me a direction. And in the past, I have learned to survive by being structured, responsible, and aligned with outer standards, like with institutions. So the conditioning has created these very solid structures. But in order to pull forward in evolution, I need the moon's archetype. So it's return to the instinct and also softness, something that nourishes, something that is felt without defense. It's an invitation not to abandon structure, but to let feeling reshape it. So I am reshaping the structure of my direction with feeling. I'm allowing my emotional body to direct me, not control me, because I have to become very aware of my emotions. I have to let the internal emotional body come forward and reparent the parts that were once held to control. And I've been speaking about my upbringing already. So it's about integration. The moon is just melting the parts that have been calcified. It is helping to open them up because we do need the support from Saturn. And it's reminding me that safety is not rigid. It's about intimacy. It's about attunement. And every time I felt this tension in relationship, I had to ask, is this a boundary or is this a wall? And that's not the only piece. My moon is in a balsamic relationship to Neptune, and it's a full moon in relationship to the sun. So again, I'm carrying multiple layers of endings and revelations. The moon and Neptune in Scorpio are dissolving in preparation for some invisible integration on my midheaven, filled with feeling but not yet released. I'm born at the axis of awareness. I carry both the light of knowing and the depth of feeling, adding another layer of invisibility, of longing, of mysticism that has no name. The moon here is not seeking to be seen, it's seeking to merge. And when you put this together with the full moon configuration, it becomes a double mirror. Consciousness and unconsciousness are both exposed. Mysticism I discovered when I was really little, but I decided to be quiet about it. I realized very early on, around 6 years old, that there were certain things I couldn't speak to others because they were going to create a little bit of problems, especially in school, because I could see and sense things far more than other people. And I did well. I did not speak up, only until I was trained. I actually looked for teachers, not only in books, but in real life. And this has been my journey to really master things through the direct transmission of people who are very specialized in different subjects. And I keep experiencing these transmissions. I keep going forward. So I was trained, my emotional body was trained not to be reactive, but to be responsive. But then those are other stories. This is not just about planetary pairs. It's also about how those pairs are held by the sun, by the axis of light, by opposition, by conjunction, by dissolution. These aspects are dynamic. They are all stages of intimacy. There's an awareness that I got to accept later in my life that whatever energy I'm emanating in the public is not how I see myself. It can be very confusing, not deceiving, but confusing because it has so many layers of depth that only if you're willing to get into those layers, you can really see me. But in a way, it's almost like I chose to be very tricky. So I only want people to really tune into my frequency to be revealed. I don't want to be part of the institutions that I was part of with my nodal axis. I'm stepping away from that. But this conjunction is also a gift. Neptune on the midheaven allows for a porous, refined sensitivity to what is invisible, what is unspoken. It lends a frequency to my public image that can be felt even when it's not explained. It opens the possibility of attunement. It asks others to trust what they sense, not just what they see. Quote, in its highest function, Neptune at the midheaven calls the individual to serve as a transmitter of universal ideas, not through institutions but through presence. It dissolves the mask of a persona, not to hide but to offer communion. The Enrudgered Astrology of Transformation. End of quote. Ta-da! Connecting through charts. This is how I read charts the way I do. Of course, you can use AI to do that, but reading charts has nothing to do with just definitions or categories. That's why I'm speaking about aspects in this article. It's about relationships and how these relationships have different depths. Machines or generic information is just pure data because all this is about correlation and observation, and correlation as a living experience. In my experience, is what I bring. Having my moon in the ninth house, my Pluto in the eighth, the sun, Mercury, and Jupiter oppose that moon, trining my Pluto and sextiling my Pluto. This is a chart that lives in tension and it requires embodiment. The moon in the ninth house is often seen as a seeker. But in Scorpio, it's seeking intensity and immersion in deep emotional resonance that must be made meaningful. The moon rules the emotional body, and the ninth house carries that Jupiter archetype, which seeks to make sense of the experience. When I say I read charts, what I mean is I connect, I perceive, I attune. It's not just the symbols. I listen to the frequency. I allow the image of the chart to guide me inward toward what is ready to be revealed. I use my curiosity to ask the right questions to tap into the psyche of the person whose chart I'm reading. I'm a very perceptive person. This works through waves. I am deeply curious, so when I read the chart, I know what to ask. This is not coming from my mind, it's coming from a feeling, something that I'm perceiving in the moment, with a part of me that has trained itself to recognize when something is ready to be seen. So, by observation and correlation, not interpretation, I'm leaving the chart. All this evolution, these cycles and growth and relational values is extremely meaningful to me. That's why I'm sharing this with you. Quote, evolutionary astrology recognizes that all astrological correlations arise within the total field of relationships between the soul and the body, between consciousness and experience, between past cycles and present intention. Jeffrey Wolf Green, Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. End of quote. Ta-da! Astromap. Right now, I'm tracking several key transits. Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo, squaring Venus in Gemini, Mercury retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo, and Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Pisces, and Pluto square Chiron at the end of Aries. What was really capturing my attention this week is that the Mars South Node conjunction in Virgo is activating this need to dive deep into discrimination, to purify patterns from the past. I'm not in a dark place, but I'm going into the darkness of my feelings. When they become thoughts, instead of letting them hover or race around me, I pause to feel them in my body. A somatic practice where I ask where they want to guide me. Through that felt sense, I can redesign my present moment. This is what Pluto square Jupiter is revealing. I've been reflecting on inherited belief systems, family, country, religion. It feels like a real opportunity to shift not just my thoughts, but how I embody them. Mercury retrograde in Leo is returning to the exact point where Mars opposed Pluto 3 times last year, and the final one on my birthday at 3 degrees of Leo and 3 degrees Aquarius, squaring my Jupiter at 3 degrees Taurus this April. Now, Mercury is retracing the same territory, bringing something back for revision. That Mars Pluto opposition was about force, power, will. Now Mercury asks, How are we thinking? Can we rethink it creatively? Can we live it differently? The answer isn't in logic, it's through the felt sense. All thoughts need to be digested. Mercury Jupiter can bring coherence, but only when it lands in the body. This is in my chart, by the way. For the rest of you, it is a creative experience. Mars and the South Node are trying to initiate a new form of discernment. Mercury rules both Virgo and Gemini, so it is tied to this conjunction as well as the Venus square. I'm using the mind to listen, to refine how I'm feeling, what I value, what gives me meaning. Venus is applying to both South Node and Mars, very close to my natal Venus in Gemini. It's squaring my natal Chiron, and the transiting nodes are aligned with my Chiron as well. This is asking me to let go of doubt, not through willpower, but through surrendering into what's actually happening right now. For example, when Bitcoin reached the new highs recently, although I had seen the signals, that fear of not having enough, FOMO, still came up. It's a body imprint of lost opportunities. My second house is ruled by Pisces in my chart, the house of values, and it has a deep memory of loss, of abandonment. I felt abandoned when my father died. The losses are always impregnated in my body as something that is missing. Therefore, my relationship with how I make myself whole is always coming from this big black hole. I've been taking careful, intentional steps, and sometimes I doubt myself, not because I made a mistake, but because I'm not embodying that decision. I let the mind run loud. So I've been shifting that. I'm noting the thought patterns writing faster than the body. The body has a denser materiality than the mind. The mind is air, it just goes around, it moves very fast. With the mind, we leave our bodies. We dysregulate our emotional felt sense. Our emotions can only be felt in the body. When they're writing the mind, I'm not aligned. So, this Mercury retrograde feels like a breakthrough moment. We're being asked to talk about value, Venus, to look at the mind, Gemini, to examine how we relate to doubt. Overanalyzing can be confusing, but the antidote is Pisces, surrender, because Pisces is at the other side, ruling the North Node. That's the direction. We need to surrender with discernment, to trust the part of ourselves that knows how to be present. It's about being in the present moment, about the breath. When I trust it, I am embodied. But when I doubt, I'm not in my body, I'm in my mind. The answer to Saturn and Neptune squaring my nodes right now, I'm seeing very carefully where the deceit has been and where the direction could be if I tend to it in the next few months. It's almost like a rehearsal dinner for what's going to happen in the next year. It's about revising everything without being overly meticulous or obsessed, but with attention. Pluto square Chiron. This is collective. Chiron in Aries is exposing the wound of self, the individuality wound, how it shows up in the collective, and the planetary nodes of Chiron are being activated. This is about all of us. Pluto is asking us to transform the wound, to shift it from being about identity to being about value. You can identify with something, but if you don't value it, there's no meaning. The planetary nodes of Chiron are located at the end of Aries and the beginning of Taurus. The South Node holds a collective memory of a wound around individuality, the deep imprint of feeling unsafe in our own selfhood, of questioning whether listening to our needs makes us selfish or unworthy of connection. It's the wound of having to suppress instinct or self direction in order to belong. And now, with Pluto squaring Chiron and these nodes being activated, that collective wound is being exposed to be made conscious so it can be transmuted into embodied value. This year, we've been moving through a full axis of eclipses in Pisces and Virgo, beginning in March and returning again this September. The first was a total lunar eclipse at 23 degrees of Virgo on March 14th, followed by a solar eclipse at 8 degrees of Aries on March 29th. Now we're moving towards a total lunar eclipse at the 15th of Pisces on September 7th, followed by a solar eclipse at 28 of Virgo on September 21st. That's the full spectrum. Virgo to Pisces, precision to surrender, clarity to mystery, embodiment to spirit. What I'm starting to feel is that it's showing us what needs to be refined and what needs to be released. With Saturn and Neptune going back retrograde into Pisces, it is all internal. No one is going to tell you how to do this. You have to feel it for yourself. That's what I mean when I say the real change is not out there, it is within. Have a great week.